Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Olian and I just stumbled across something which I found rather interesting. And that's the fact that when you do a low cut on some things, you can actually lose headroom. While I was for a long time thinking, well, if you take something away, you should definitely technically gain some space. But you do lose some headroom when you low cut some things. And since we usually low cut many things, I guess, in order to make some space for the bass and the kick and this kind of stuff, um, it's kind of important, I guess, to know this because you should know what's happening with the audio that you're working on. So anyway, let me show you an example of where I stumbled across this little fact, and then we can look into it slightly deeper. So I was working on reconstructing some of the drums of Finesse by Bruno Mars because I found that track kind of cool and some of the elements were very nice, and I felt like if I can add them to my arsenal, then that would be cool. So I'm actually going to put those videos, or once I figured out some of the stuff, I'm going to put those reconstruction videos on my channel as well. So make sure to subscribe if you're interested in watching those in the coming days. Anyway, let's jump in. This is the intro, the drum intro I was working on. And we had the snare, or I had the snare over here, which had quite a lot of low end. So I added a low cut over here. And because kind of like muddy, subby stuff below the fundamental of the stuff that you can see here. So I realized, I basically stumbled across this because I was looking at the limiter. I just had a limiter on there to like tame the peaks slightly. And I realized that with the low cut enabled, the limiter was working quite a lot, as you can see over here. And if the low cut is disabled, we're hardly limiting. And I found that super interesting because that must mean that we're actually losing headroom or increasing the peak of the snare, and therefore also completely changing the transient in a way. And I'm not saying that you might not be able to take care of that with a limiter or compression, this kind of stuff later on, but we're obviously doing something quite heavy to the sound by just adding a low cut. And I think that's important to acknowledge at this point. So let's take off the limiter and actually look into the mixer and see what the difference in peak level is when we use the low cut and when we don't use the low cut. So without the low cut, we're peaking at negative 7.45 dB. And with the low cut, we're like at peaking at negative 3.54 dB. So that's a huge difference. Let's see. So that's like 4 dB of headroom that we're losing just by adding this little low cut over here. I think that's pretty significant. And I mean, I'm not a great audio engineer in this kind of stuff, but I mean, we're using, even amateur producers are using low cuts on many things in their production. So I think it's important to know what's going on. Let's look at this visually just to see the difference. And then maybe we can give it a listen to see if it also changes a lot in sound, which it obviously does because you're cutting a lot of low end, but overall the sound of the snare. So what I'm going to do real quick in Ableton is just do another quick audio track, go over here and go to resampling so we can record this fella. And what I'm going to do is I'm first going to be recording this snare without a low cut and then enable the low cut like halfway through. So let's give it a listen. Here we go. Let's give it a look, what we can see over here. So, I mean, wow, look at this difference. This is without the low cut, and the snare looks totally fine, you know, has a nice transients and stuff and looks kind of compact and stuff. But then once we add the low cut, we get this ridiculous peak over here. We get this very ridiculous peak. We're actually also changing the transient in general quite a bit, also in the beginning. And so yeah, that's the difference visually. I mean, look at this. That's pretty intense, I would say. Right, so yeah, we're losing a lot of headroom. We're losing like 4 dB of headroom. So what we could do is technically use the limiter then and try to get rid of that by just enabling the limiter and just bringing the ceiling. Well, we were peaking at -7, right? So let's disable the low cut and put it in a way that the limiter is just working, and then back it off a bit. So right now we're just over there, like we're just getting to the point of the ceiling of the limiter, so it's not limiting at all. So that now once we enable the low cut, we actually should limit the difference out, you know? And as we can see here, we're like doing negative, we're doing like 5 dB of gain reduction because of the limiter now. So let's listen to the difference and actually start from the beginning. Low cut. So obviously I'm using these headphones and they're not perfect to listen to this mud. I don't think when you listen to it that the difference is huge, but probably some expert's ear would hear many different things which I cannot hear at this point. And you would obviously have to listen to it in context as well. But let's look just at this limited version visually once more, so we can just see what the transients look like now. Yep, let's go over here and do this. Starting without a low cut and then adding the low cut in. So yeah, we're still getting like a slightly more peaky situation overall. Yeah, we're getting this weird thing in the beginning over here. Maybe we could push the limiter even slightly harder, but that would probably destroy the sound even more. So at this point, yeah, this is what happens when you low cut. It changes the audio quite a lot. So I guess when we get better and we train our ears, we can make more educated decisions on how we handle this kind of situation, if we do the low cut, if we don't do the low cut, and what kind of processing we apply afterwards. But at this point we at least know that when you low cut something, that you can really lose like easily 4 dB of headroom, which I find super interesting. And now a helicopter is coming, so this is a good point to end the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you also learned something, since I just learned something. And yeah, if you feel like you like these kind of videos, feel free to subscribe and stick around on my channel. I'm uploading 1 video a day currently, so there's a lot of stuff coming up in the coming days and weeks and this kind of stuff. So yeah, thanks for watching and have a good one.